Let us join together on this 160th anniversary of what today is known as the Glenelg United Methodist Church in reviewing the path our predecessors followed so that we may honor the great deeds they accomplished in the name of Christ. Three major branches of the Methodist Church existed until the creation of the United Methodist Church in 1968. They were the Methodist Episcopal Church, the United Brethren, and the Evangelical Association, which later became the Evangelical Church. Glenelg Heritage emerged from the Methodist Episcopal Church branch in 1859 with the construction of the Westwood Chapel. Unfortunately, with the onset of the Civil War and a divided congregation, some members of Westwood left and joined the Methodist Episcopal Church South. This eventually led to the construction of the Providence Church in 1889. In the meantime, Westwood prospered and expanded with a new building in 1921 and was renamed the Westwood Memorial Church. The Uniting Conference, held in 1939, united the three branches of the Methodist Episcopal Church, resulting in the creation of the Methodist Church. This consolidation led to Westwood and Providence reuniting in 1961, forming the Glenelg Methodist Church. Prior to that merger, Westwood had gone through another building expansion in 1956, with an addition that joined the original 1859 chapel with the chapel built in 1921. The General Conference held in 1968 brought together the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren, forming the United Methodist Church. Shortly thereafter, in 1969, the Glenelg Methodist Church broke ground for the Glenelg United Methodist Church at our present location on Burnt Woods Road. We will now delve more deeply into our history. On the 8th day of August, 1859, in the Mount Pleasant Schoolhouse, located near the intersection of Burnt Woods and Ivory Roads, a group of men from the area met to form a new church. They assembled under and in pursuance of an act of the General Assembly of Maryland entitled, "An Act to Incorporate Certain Persons in Every Christian Church or Congregation in the State." This became the Westwood Chapel of the Methodist Episcopal Church. It was named for the Reverend Henry C. Westwood, minister of Union Chapel, who presided over all the organizational meetings. The new church was built on a half-acre lot. In October 1859, the cornerstone was laid and construction soon completed at a cost of $1,200. Services were held every Sunday, conducted by ministers appointed to serve the Patapsco Circuit, made up of all of Howard, part of Carroll, and a portion of Montgomery County. These ministers, called circuit riders, traveled by horseback, using their saddlebags for their Bibles, food, clothing, and pillows for use when they found themselves far from shelter at night. At times, they were frequent overnight guests at the home of James L. Parsley in the Glenelg neighborhood. Often they requested that their hostess iron the bed to provide warmth before retiring. All went well at the newly formed church until 1861. The beginning of the Civil War caused much unrest among the states, which was also felt among the people of the churches. Westwood became divided on this issue. Services continued in the chapel, but at different hours. Finally, some members withdrew to hold services elsewhere. Some of the members of this group were eventually to become the organizers of the Providence Church, which became a church in the Methodist Episcopal Church South. In 1886, Mr. Lloyd Linthicum, who was one of the original trustees of the Westwood Chapel, started a Sunday school in the new Glenelg School, located at the intersection of Triadelphia and Dorsey Mill Roads. Thereafter, Worship services soon started and continued in the schoolhouse. In July of 1889, a month of revival services were held in the torchlit grove beside the school. As a result of this effort, there were 68 conversions and the birth of a new church. In October of the same year, the cornerstone of the Providence Church was laid. In March 1899, the Freedom Charge, of which Providence was a part, was divided, and the 5 churches of Howard County, Concord, Harmony, Linden, Mount Zion, and Providence, became the Howard Charge with Reverend Lambert as pastor. In 1916, a new era began when the Reverend D.F. Otzler arrived by motor car. It was the horse and buggy days at the turn of the century at Westwood. Traveling was very slow until 1916 when the Reverend Arthur C. Day came by automobile. From this period on, traveling increased, as did the population, and by the year of 1920, the need for expansion of the church became apparent. A large portion of the lumber was donated, and members donated their time and energy by cutting logs, hauling them to the sawmill, and assisted where they could until the building was completed. The cornerstone was laid on May 8, 1921. The dedication for the new building, the Westwood Memorial Methodist Episcopal Church, was held on November 12, 1921. Regular Sunday worship services were held on alternate Sunday afternoons and Sunday school every Sunday. In July of 1954, the Westwood Official Board met to discuss plans for an addition to the church. The building committee was appointed as follows: C. Marion Anderson, Stanley Sullivan, Herbert Sullivan, Fred Fink, Elwood Anderson, and Harry L. Eyre, Jr. The plans were later approved for 4 additional Sunday school rooms, 2 powder rooms, and an extension to the kitchen. This was so constructed as to connect the already existing buildings. Ground was broken in March of 1956, and the new building was completed in June of that year. The 1939 General Conference held in Kansas City, Missouri, gave the 2 churches, Westwood and Providence, their first step to becoming one. For it was on May 10th that the Methodist Protestant Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church, and the Methodist Episcopal Church South became united as the Methodist Church. With this change, the whole Methodist Church was reorganized, and consequently some of the circuits were changed. The St. James Circuit lost Lisbon and gained Providence. The other 3 churches on the circuit remained the same. In June of 1956, services were discontinued at McKendree Church, and the members transferred to St. James Church. This resulted in a 3-point charge. During this time, Providence had made plans for an addition to the church, but with St. James announcing that they were to become a station church, the future of Providence was uncertain, and the expansion plans were abandoned. In June of 1960, plans were being made to merge the Westwood and Providence churches. Joint services were held at each church on alternating Sundays. In July of 1961, there was a congregational vote taken at both churches, in which they favored to merge as one congregation. After numerous meetings throughout the summer and fall, the 2 began worshiping as one on December 10, 1961, with the Reverend Gene R. Perry as pastor. Thus, the Glenelg Methodist Church came into existence. The Westwood Church, because of its size and modern facilities, was the one chosen for the services until such time as a new church would be needed. In June of 1962, Glenelg Methodist Church became a station church. The St. James Charge ceased existence after 53 years of operation. The Reverend Clarence A. Kaler became our first full-time minister. At a special meeting of the quarterly conference on March 12, 1964, plans were approved for the purchase of 11 acres of land on Burnt Woods Road for a new church building. The cost for the land was $16,500. A Faith in the Future campaign for the new church building got underway. The goal for pledges was set at $75,000. The sum of $83,120 was pledged, and the building committee began its work. The sum of $252,000 was borrowed from Baltimore Federal Savings and Loan Association. A loan of $20,000 at 3% interest was made from the Board of Missions of the Baltimore Conference, and a gift of $15,000 from the Board of Missions was accepted. The building committee members consisted of Vernon Bandel, Edwin Glocker, Clark Jameson, William Musgrove, Paul Redinger, Dorothy Assendorf, Mary Kay Kitty Eyre, Clayton Miller, and Will Speece. Groundbreaking services were held on February 2, 1969. On February 1, 1970, the first services in the new church took place. The new church was now the Glenelg United Methodist Church, due to the merger of the Methodist Church and Evangelical United Brethren Church that occurred on April 23, 1968, at the General Conference held in Dallas, Texas. What is now known as Air Hall was the sanctuary for the new church. The church was built with expansion in mind, which happened 15 years later. The original plans for the new building included a sanctuary. When the congregation decided to move to its current location, they built what they could afford at the time and chose to wait on building the sanctuary until an undetermined time in the future. In September of 1983, Janet Cotton made a challenge to the church. She offered a very generous monetary gift provided it would be used for building a sanctuary. Janet's challenge and her donation were accepted. Janet was raised in our church and officially became a member in 1950. Her parents were Lena May and Lurlin Hobbs. Both were members of our church. Lena May joined in 1918, and Lurlin joined years later in 1958. Planning for the new sanctuary began in earnest in late 1984. Headed by Don Alexander, the building committee included the following members: Dorothy Assendorf, Mary Kay Kitty Eyre, Carol Farlow, John Harmon, the Reverend Cliff Harrison, Carl Hood, Walter Megan, John Myers, Will Speece, and Steve Walker. The groundbreaking ceremony was held on September 29, 1985, using the same plow used in 1969 to break ground for the existing building. The plow was provided by William and Elsie Musgrove, a retired Howard County farming family and longtime members of the church. The Reverend Cliff Harrison, pastor, and Reverend John Wesley Coleman, superintendent of the Baltimore Southwest District, presided over the ceremony. Construction trailers were on site at the groundbreaking ceremony, and construction began immediately. The building included a sanctuary, sacristy, bell tower with chapel, offices at ground level, and 7 classrooms underneath. The architect was Ben Elliott of Dwayne Elliott and Associates of Rockville. It was built by Genesis Construction Company, Incorporated, at a cost of $703,000. The first Sunday worship in the new sanctuary was conducted on September 29, 1986, exactly 1 year after the groundbreaking ceremony. The formal consecration ceremony was held at a 4 p.m. service on November 2nd. It was attended by more than 300 members and friends of Glenelg UMC. The ceremony was presided over by the Reverend Cliff Harrison, pastor, and Bishop Joseph H. Yackel of the Baltimore-Washington Conference. Donald Alexander, chairman of the building committee, formally presented the keys to the church to Nancy Arula, president of the board of trustees. From left to right in the photo are Reverend Cliff Harrison, Nancy Arula, Donald Alexander, and Bishop Joseph Yackel. Pat Schwinger was a longtime member of Glenelg UMC, becoming a member in 1979. Pat loved Glenelg Church and desired to do something which would be a lasting resting place for future members. Before passing away on July 30th, 2016, she discussed her plans with her husband, the Reverend Richard Dick Schwinger, her son Scott, and with the pastor, Reverend Alice Ford. Many of Pat's thoughts were incorporated into the finished project. Her hopes were for many persons to have a place of quiet and solitude. Reverend Schwinger hired the contractor and oversaw construction of the project. The first meeting of the Memorial Committee, consisting of Tom Cash, Hope Hutton, Reverend Lynn Knowlton, and Reverend Schwinger, was held on January 7, 2017, and the conceptual design was presented to the congregation on March 5th. Construction began in the spring and culminated in a dedication ceremony which included Pat's internment on a rainy, solemn, yet thanks-filled day on November 5th, 2017. The kitchen, originally built in 1969, served the church well for nearly 50 years, but a renovation had been needed for many years. Mary Kay "Kitty" Eyre had been a very long-time member of the church, having been a member of the building committees for both the 1969 and 1986 Glenelg UMC construction phases. Kitty passed away in May of 2017, but her love for the church continued on with a sizable donation that she left for the church. Her thoughtful foresight enabled the church to undertake the long-awaited kitchen renovation, among many other much-needed projects to beautify and protect the church she loved. Kitchen demolition began in late summer of 2018 and was completed in January of 2019. The entire trustee staff worked tirelessly to complete the project under the leadership of Craig Brown, chairman, Tom Eyre, Kitty's son, and Bill Dodd, who donated his skills as a building contractor to manage the job. Other trustee and kitchen committee members contributing included Hope Hutton, A.B. Brackens, Daryl Horner, Sue Dodd, John Gibson, David Wood, Kathy Hoshko, Medessa Burian, Gary Bell, Chuck Nemi, Sandy Speece, Cassie Felch, Carol Williamson, Peggy Cash, and Jan Lee. We have been led on a 160-year journey of dedicated servants of Christ, starting with visionaries in 1859 who laid the foundation for what has grown into the Glenelg United Methodist Church. We have survived divisions, embraced unification, and through it all continued to remain disciples of Christ. As we face present-day divisive issues, let us learn from our past that we are always stronger together. Glenelg UMC is a strong and vibrant Christian community that holds great promise for the future. Let us honor those who paved the way for us by giving freely of their time, talents, and treasures by doing likewise. Peace be with you.